Hello, everyone. Today we're going to be talking about exiting the Matrix, again. Wait, I already thought I exited the Matrix. I had my awakening. Oh, maybe you did, maybe you didn't. And this is a play on and kind of review / exploration of the different topics and pieces and breakthroughs and inspiration and creepy parts of the new Matrix Resurrection movie. So I'm using it as a catalyst for this conversation in this moment so that we can learn from these different pieces, right? It's a great piece of material, of content that we can explore together. So there are spoiler alerts for sure. So if you're going to see it, probably listen to this after. And it's not necessarily necessary to see it. You know, I mean, if you feel called, if you feel compelled, absolutely. And if you don't, then don't. It's definitely, I've seen that for different friends and people in my life. And so follow, obviously, your intuition around it. But there are many pieces that we're going to dive into today that are super cool and interesting. So I am filming right now this and the visual for my podcast. This is for Wild and Awake, so you can definitely go and listen to it on Spotify, on iTunes, and the different platforms. If you want to just listen to it in your ears while you're doing those dishes, while you're at the gym, while you're, driving your car, you can definitely do that. And I understand that the visual piece is somehow compelling, so I honor that and I appreciate that very much. So I'm filming this as well because I know the YouTube crowd loves this subject when I talk about exiting the Matrix. And of course, it's going to be super fun. So I will be looking down at my notes at different times because I go full stream of consciousness with this. That's one of the reasons I love podcasts, is so that I can just flow and jam and be in more of a trance state rather than engaging and entertaining you through the visual. And in that space, I can just go a lot deeper. So I'm not editing this, and we're just going to go with the flow of it. So speaking of that, I want to touch on some of the topics we're going to cover in this exploration of the Matrix, or the leaving of it, which is the concept of falling asleep within the Matrix again. We're going to be talking about what is the Matrix and what can you choose or decide is real, which is a crazy concept rabbit hole in and of itself. Being very wary of mainstream culture, which we know about, but it's easy to get duped back in because it's so pervasive in every aspect of our life. We're going to be talking about divine union and partnership within the masculine and feminine dynamic, which is beautiful. And we're going to be talking about femininity a lot. This is actually what came through quite a bit. And these different concepts are things that came through for me when I saw the movie 2 times. But I also discussed these topics with a lot of friends. And so there were really cool new perspectives that came in that I was like, I didn't even notice that. Including technology and like how far we go with technology and integrate, AI and creepiness into our life versus rejecting it and just becoming a puritanical society. So how do we navigate also technology? So those are some of the subjects we're going to be covering in this exploration, and I'm excited. Let's just go right into it. It's fun navigating between the camera and this, and we'll see how I can stay, how trancy I can stay in this. And for those of you who watch my YouTube videos, go over to my Wild and Awake podcast because I have so many episodes and I've almost uploaded none on YouTube. So I've got like 35 episodes of really interesting conversations that are super deep and vast. So be sure to go check those out as well. So this is like, hey, remember, I do podcasts now. Go over and check that out. Okay, so going into it. The first thing that came through for me as I watched the new Matrix movie was a realization that I had been getting the same download as the creators for the past few years. And you've probably heard it if you've seen my other Exiting the Matrix videos in the past couple years, which is this concept that has continued to come through, which came through very clearly in the movie, is that you can have your awakening. You can remember your oneness, be the one. You can remember your oneness. And then you can completely fall back asleep in the Matrix. And this I have been seeing so clearly. I went on a recent trip to Austin, Texas, and I was around all these beautiful, beautiful spiritual people. I'm not saying everyone, but generally I could see this mentality of like, I'm spiritually awakened and I'm living this spiritual lifestyle, but the actual consciousness wasn't there. It was just kind of like playing the part of a spiritual person rather than actually truly embodying and continuing to dive deep into the work, to dive deep into the soul, to continue to crack, continue to merge. Like those pieces, those like fiery and melty, mergy aspects had died. And I was like, I'm drinking my chai latte and I'm doing this. And so then I'm spiritual. And it's like, no, there's more. And so this is what came up in the movie. And it was going two ways. So the concept is that I think movie 3, like Neo and Trinity like die, right? You know, it's sacrifice to end the Matrix or however that ended up working. So they died. So it was as if then they were plugged back in. So that's like they reincarnated and they were plugged back in. And so there's two dual, I think, philosophies you could see happening here. Is one, which is so true. It's like even if you have had these lives of realization, right? These starseed incarnations or these epiphany soul experiences in higher densities as higher beings, you can be plopped back in to third density. You can be plopped back into that matrix and oh shoot, you forgot your connection to source. You forgot all the advancements you made. And part of the process of this life, of this incarnation, particularly in this density, in this game, and we'll talk about the Matrix game and stuff in a minute, is to remember again, is to wake back up. And then you have to wake back up within this game, within this lifetime, ideally as quickly as possible, because then you're not only, the goal isn't just to do the awakening part, right? The goal is to kind of hurry and awaken so that then you can be of service and do the part of why you came back, quote, back down to be of service. So bring those higher templates, bring those like starseed energies like in and emanate it, and then help catalyze the awakening of others that have never awakened. It's their first transition from third density to fourth density. And so in this, it's the realization that for most of us, you know, we had these echoes of remembrance probably when we were children, and we remembered these other times. We remembered why we're here, those echoes. It's just like so beautiful. But generally speaking, we had to go through, we have to go back through each time we incarnate the first density, second density, third density, like within even our trajectory in this life. And that as well is interesting because even the concept of like, oh, but I've been this fifth or sixth density master. Well, if we're going through even the experience, what I've been going through the past 5 years, it's ended probably the past 2 years, which is I've been going through deep levels of martyrdom and unconditional love without the wisdom. And in that's fourth density. So it's actually like pretty high exploration, but I'm still not at the space by any means that I had been in those other times. So we're going back through and remembering. And so that is a part of the piece, is that even, being awakened, even being Neo, even being the one, which is remembering oneness in my experience, because it's like the most ironic thing, right? It's like, you're the one. And it's like, well, actually, no, if you're the one, then you remember that you are all things and you're connected to everything, which means that you're then not the isolated one. Everyone else is the one and you're connected to everything. So it's not that I don't see it as, I mean, it kind of needs to, in the archetypal narrative, be the savior complex. But just the nature of calling it the one, I think also indicates the oneness aspect for those that can see it more multidimensionally. So there's that piece as well. So we're needing to come back in each incarnation, even if we were super advanced, and forget it all and wake back up out of the matrix. And that's what we're doing here. And so that's what we are seeing Neo do in the movie. And technically that's more, I think, what they were showing is like the incarnational process. But I also really want to emphasize or use it as a catalyzing force within the conversation of the awakening, which is, oh, I've awakened, now I'm good. And it's like, oh man, there's so far. We can go so far with elevating our consciousness, with becoming incredible, beautiful, kind, benevolent, service to others, compassionate, wise, strong, boundary clear humans, that it's just that initial impulse of awakening, or that initial pull or shift out of the matrix is just the beginning. It's a constant decluttering, a constant unveiling that needs to be a continual process, because this density is so dense. It wants to just like creep back in and be like, ah. And then you think you're awake, but you're in the matrix, and you think that that's real, and it's not. And then you're actually 2 layers deep and 2 layers in forgetfulness, which is even worse and even harder to get out of than doing it that first time and then seeing the light for the first time. So just being very aware in our lives, in our experiences, of the things that put us back asleep. And in the movie, he, to stay in that asleep state, he was taking the blue pills, right? He just like kept on taking the blue pill, like every day was his medication. So I think that there's a dual also thing of like he's choosing, the blue pill with his free will, and he's also taking medication. So we're looking at the things that put us back to sleep. And so just being aware of those things in our life when they can creep back in. It's like, ooh, the medications, the alcohol, like the certain kinds of food, the media, the collective fields, like tainted sexuality, like all these things can just kind of creep back in, and they're straight up blue pills. And so we really need to discern and differentiate and be like, that's a blue pill. And just like really noting that's a blue pill, this is a red pill. And being super clear on what things are. And the funny thing is, actually in the past couple months, I've been more available or more able to handle blue pill reality, which is almost never happened in my life. But as I do more of my work, as I do more of my trauma release, and I have more of a solid core and solid knowing in who I am way less fractured and fragmented and porous as an empathetic, sensitive being, that I can handle more of the blue pill matrix reality, which I personally perceive vibrationally as cities, as certain, collective consciousness fields, as certain like mainstream narratives. And I can actually handle it more, but because you can handle it doesn't mean that you should always choose it. So it's a fine line. It's a delicate balance. Now, one of the things that was key in the transition of him in the reawakening, the reemergence, the resurrection back out of the matrix, and one of the keys is to stay hyper vigilant, not to the point where you're psychotic. Oh, because I've been there too, where you're just like, oh, everything's putting me back into the matrix. Oh no, I had this non-organic piece of food and now I'm gonna fall asleep. Or, oh, I took a shower in municipal water. I'm screwed. Like being so hypervigilant that then you actually lose your vibration. And it's like far worse to lose the vibration than it is to actually like have those physical pieces. So yeah, again, writing this line between the two and staying hypervigilant of vibration more than anything, and also not being naive to how much physical and energetic things can impact your vibration, right? So choosing who you are in that space. And one of the things that I really liked was the idea of keeping, go with me on this for a second, keeping the fight alive. And I'm not saying like aggression and adversarial, like malevolent energy, but that fight in the sense of like that fire, like that fire that burns anything that is not truth. Keeping that super alive within our souls and within our being, within our action. Like even right now, you can probably hear in my voice that I'm not using water necessarily in this conversation. I feel my blood pulsing. I feel that circulation. And so really using aliveness in the sense of fire, soul force, and the fire element is a pervasive energy within our everyday lives. And I see it as like a sort of truth. I see it as like a clear boundary of what is real, of what is not, of what aligns with us with what is, and also what doesn't. And so keeping that, because we saw Neo, like he needed to get his mojo back. Like he needed that training to keep that fire alive, because part of what keeps us in the matrix is the super apathetic, which is a very low level of consciousness. This apathetic, low level, like, yeah, I mean, I guess, like, if it's going to help everyone, I guess I will get the V. Like, it's just like, oh, and then everything will go back to normal. And most of those physical, emotional, psychic energies that continue to be matrixy and blue pill are these like, zombie vibes. No zombie vibes. Zombie vibes are matrix. So being very aware that this soul fire, that fire, I guess fire has been used in such negative ways, like we think about anger. It's like anger's been used in really bad ways, like in like hatred, and those energies have been coined as negative. But there's positive fire, positive soul fire. And so really exploring that for yourself and what that looks like in a healthy way, because I think culturally we're like, oh, I need to be passive because fire and anger and hatred like has caused massive pain and massive trauma in the world. And that's not right. We're needing to balance these different elemental forces in our own body, and they're needed. And so training, I think, on a very deep level to have this strength, to have this resilience on all levels, mentally, physically, spiritually, is essential. And I've definitely been doing this. I feel like you're not hearing it come out in my energy right now as much, but I felt more soft and feminine and compassionate and flowy in my femininity than I actually ever have in my life in these past months. And actually, once you cultivate yin energy, which is that feminine energy, and that's restored to a really good amount in Taoism, particularly in your kidneys, that's needed. It's like a necessary foundation for then you to bring in the fire energy. So it kind of makes sense. I can go deeper into that in other videos. So the yin is very necessary to actually create the foundation or the space for the fire to not burn out the water, to burn out the yin, because it can so easily do that. We've seen that culturally for thousands of years with the feminine, right? It's just like, like masculine, unhealthy, distorted energy just burns out the yin feminine. And we're still seeing that because now we have hyper masculine women. And so the yin cultivation is super essential. But there's something about also doing a balanced energy of the strong resilience and training that's so massively powerful in this time. And I've been doing that physically, like I'm stronger than I've ever been physically. It's like I can't not train. because I need that resilience for these times. Mentally challenging ourselves, challenging our beliefs, having friends, having coaches, having therapists, whatever you need to really get in there and to continue that muscle building, which is building our soul, and, spiritually, like continuing those cultivation practices. All of that is just so, so essential to not fall back asleep. All right, so we're 20 minutes in, and I'm like, don't fall asleep. And if you do fall asleep, wake yourself back up and get out of the apathetic slumber. But that was just so, so key, and I was so happy to see that as a mainstream infiltration, if you will, like through this movie, because I've been getting that for the past couple years and seeing people fall asleep, yet thinking they're awake, and they're back in the Matrix. Oh, no. Oh. And that's what he did with Neo's own game. He's like, I'm making you think you're in your own game, or like that this is your game and it's separate from you, but you're actually asleep within your own game. It's like, it's like Inception kind of stuff right there. And so let's go into what is the Matrix, and what is real, because that discernment can start to be really trippy. And I feel like there were a lot of, kind of blatant suicidal tendencies put out and almost prescribed. It could be that negative shadow aspect of the movie, throughout the movie, because it's like I can't discern, and so I start to go like crazy because I can't actually figure out what is real and what is not. And that is a very, very deep subject, and I would love to go, and I probably will go deeper into that. And it's like, is this a simulation? And if it is a simulation, there's a hollow, almost cold feeling where we don't want to be in a simulation. And so there's this rejection of the reality, if that's the case, if that's the narrative or the belief system that we're bought into. And I mean, you can, of course, believe whatever you want, but I think it's both. I think that when you're at this space of paradox, that's when you're really at this space of power and this space of truth. And so it is, for me, what feels empowering, which is truth, is that it is a simulation in a sense, but it's a benevolent simulation. It's a soul simulation. And even just like using that word starts to feel like cold, and I feel a pull in my solar plexus, and I want to stop using that word. And I want to even maybe go over to one layer more positive, where it's a game. And so I think for me, and I truly feel this, and I've had the realizations, and I've seen the template structures to where this truly feels aligned for me, and you can tune into what feels aligned for you, but that this is a reality game. And it is a setup. And it's a setup by creation, by the one, by the different and factions. It's interesting how even just the language takes us into another timeline, like the way that it's presented, in these different layers and perspectives of the one. This is a creation game setup of this perspective. And for me, that sounds really empowering. It's kind, that God, creation, the one, the universe, divine, whatever, our higher selves that are coming down from the one are yes, here's this experience. I'm granting you experience as a soul. It's almost like a grandfather or a parent being here, little child, I want you to experience this. And that just feels so kind and loving. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be challenging, but obstacle courses are challenging, and if you haven't done it before, it might be even harder. And so thinking of it that way for me is very empowering, where the origins of it come from benevolence, and it is for the ultimate good of each of us individually and collectively to go through this game. There's massive growth, massive exploration, massive experience that can be had that is kind, that is loving. And so in that, I don't want to reject it, and I don't want to be it's a simulation thing, and it's against me. And then you want to push it away, and that's where I think those suicidal and also mental confusion programs come in, which I think are negative psyops. Because if you just go and do that, your soul doesn't transition correctly, and then you remain an earthbound spirit, and then you're actually more bound to this reality, and then it is a complete mess, and it actually helps facilitate more negativity on the planet. So this idea that it is positive, it is benevolent, I think is a empowering approach that you can adopt if you want, or take it or leave it. And so seeing that is helpful. And then also really, really remembering that what is real, even though it's not seemingly real through the five senses, is spirit, is soul. And one of the things that the movie does, just kind of by the nature of, well, it could do it differently. It could do it differently. Like you think of Doctor Strange, and it was saying that the astral body, that, when Doctor Strange gets like pushed out of his body, that the astral body was actually who he was. His body didn't really matter, right? But the Matrix, probably because it was, coming from a 1999, consciousness perspective, it was like, oh, Neo's body is now taken out of the Matrix, and so that means he is now out of the Matrix. It's like, no, his body is just the avatar. It is an amazing intelligent suit that can radiate then his soul spirit through it. But what is real is soul. What is real is spirit. And so I think really tuning into that and really keeping that at the forefront of our hearts as we go through this process and you navigate like what is real and what is not. In these moments where there's massive chaos in the world, it's like, oh my God. What brings me home to myself, and what keeps me going, what keeps me motivated, what keeps me aligned, and what keeps me clear in my mind and in my spirit, particularly mentally and physically, is that return to soul, is that return to heart, is that return to spirit, what is eternal, what is real, what does not die, right? And so keeping that the spirit is what is real is a really good, is essential, and keeps us on track of what we're meant to do here. And so again, paradoxically, we're living in a very physical reality where it's sometimes hard to remember that, and yet it's the very thing that keeps us sane and keeps us track in this game. And so that was one of the pieces that my dad brought up. He was like, yeah, they kept on saying that, like, Neo's body is what is, what is real. And it's like, it's not. It's like what's eternal. So imagery-wise, because I'm very visual, keeping that there's way better examples. But if we're just going with movie themes right now, going with that Doctor Strange, like astral body is what is real, is a better image than like his body being unplugged from the Matrix. So as an idea. So continuing with this idea of what is real, I really love Seven Bomar's concept, because he does a lot on the Matrix, and I suggest going and checking out his videos and content on this. He is super red pill. Oh man, I love red pill people. But he talks about, and I'm not sure if he does still today, but I resonate with it, that he talks about the Gaian matrix versus like the synthetic matrix. And I have also really good I have tons of videos, tons of content on this that goes deeper into these different things, but really understanding and fleshing out this concept is going to be super helpful. So the synthetic matrix being all these ways that particularly like the elements and the elementals have been psyoped. And you think it's real, you think it's what you want, but it's not actually giving you that consciousness aspect. It's like, it's synthetic. So a great example is a swimming pool. So you can be in like Mexico, and there's the beach, the ocean right there with like Mother Gaia consciousness, just like beaming negative ions and just like speaking, singing, pulsing through you, right? But there's this complete program where everyone's at the pool, which is dead water with chlorine, with a bunch of alcohol and a bunch of just like music and like all these different things that are synthetic, and it's giving you the simulation. It's this blue, beautiful, I don't know how it's blue, maybe it's like the paint color, or this blue, beautiful water, and it's like, ooh, yes, this is like this is what feels good. This is the water element. It's like, no, it's not. We're being like, even the water coming out of our taps, it's like, ooh, yeah, this is water. I'm connected to water. It's like, no, it's dead water that's full of all these chemicals. So it's not actually then what feeds us and what feeds our soul and what reminds us that we are merged, that in our ideal space, which is the remembrance of oneness, when we know that we're in this higher space, we're in a constant merging process. And these things that are synthetic, these elementals that are synthetic, you can't merge with them. And when you merge with them, you extend your aura. You extend and remember your oneness, because in that process, you're becoming more whole, because you're merging with that which is outside of you, but you realize that it is you, and then you're expanding within yourself. So another great example is this freaking like blue light ring behind me. My brain is taking it in like, ooh, light. I love light. But what it really wants is the sun. What it really wants is a fire, and a candle and a flame. And that's what feeds it. And that's what you can actually engage with consciously. And so really, really dedicating yourself to earth, to Gaia, to the physical elementals. And I think that there's a break in us doing this, one, because we've been disconnected, like most of us are not even touching the earth or touching like, beautiful earth, water, goodness for long times, long points throughout our week, throughout months. So we've forgotten that it is benevolent, that earth is benevolent, that the Gaian program is reminding us who we are. It is an ally on this path, through this game, through this exploration and experience of soul consciousness in this reality. And so utilizing it, and we forgot because we've been disconnected. And then also because I think there's two things. We've been disconnected, and then also there's this energy of, oh, well, that's primitive. It's like, yeah, it's primitive. It's dirt. It's like, oh, it's rain. I got to get out of the rain. Or like, oh, it's cold out here. It's like, oh man, no. The incredible intelligence and availability we have to interact with elemental beings and cultivate those relationships, which then amplify our own capacity for love and merging, which then makes it able for us to then merge our plasma bodies, our energetic bodies with bigger energies. So literally your connection with the rain or with like a rock and your ability to connect with that is the beginning stage, is the elementary stage of you being able to merge and commune with a star, to merge and commune with the sun. It's profound. If you haven't gone and listened to my interviews with Dan Winter, there's 2 parts now to them, and this goes more into that concept. So it's actually hyper advanced, and critically necessary for the future of humanity, for the concept of ensoulment. Because if we miss this piece, if we aren't allowing our auras to expand and merge with what is real, with earth, with the natural elements, with ourself, what is nature, what is natural, over time we will not be able to ensoul and continue the fertility and future of humanity. So it's critically necessary. And I feel like one of the ways that we can know that it's real is because creation can continue through that means. And so through the development of that, what I was just talking about, which is, I'm just kind of putting this concept out right here without explanation. So please go search for those interviews for the greater context. But if creation can continue, say through new babies being able to be born and fertility and expansion of consciousness, that feels real. That's real. That's creation at play. You can't just genetically modify that or like use technology. Technology will fail eventually in that category. That's why we have the grays. That's why the zetas and many other beings like stopped being able to reproduce, is because they forgot this piece. So really leaning into Earth, really leaning into the Gaian program as a real reality, if that again resonates. And that, again, remembering that Earth is now at 4th density. So we're in this 3rd density reality as far as collective consciousness in most mainstream cities and places. In higher sacred site energy places, the consciousness can actually go up to where it can be more 4th density. But reminding again, that the untainted, more pure nature is already there. So we can just lean into that energy and breathe it as real into our spirits, into our beings. And I feel like that's very helpful for our mental health and spiritual health as we get into that space of confusion and those programs of simulation, and that cold technological energy infiltrates our consciousness with something that isn't helpful. Like, and is it helpful? No, because again, I already like laid out, where that road leads, and that isn't helpful to your soul or to the positive continuation of humanity. So there's a lot there, take what you want, leave what you want. And let's continue on. So yes, again, trusting your natural biology, trusting your body as your friend, right? Again, it's our avatar suit, but also it is how our soul, our higher self is communicating with us. So it's a communication device too. So realizing the instinct, the intuition, that these impulses that come through our body are saying something and talking to us. And that's very important too. And realizing that it's talking to us, and it could be saying that there's an imbalance. So not necessarily saying that it's truth. Good example that's not controversial. Well, maybe it is controversial, heaven knows, is the idea of like, my body's telling me I want that cookie, intuition, like I'm craving this, so that must mean that's what I need. And it's like, well, yeah, I mean, your body, your microbiome is completely oriented in this certain way, and you have like bacteria and yeast and parasites that are actually telling you to crave the gluten and to crave the sugars and stuff like that. So it's like you can't actually trust an imbalanced body of what it needs. So you need to return to balance and figure out what balance is. This is the same concept for everything. So it's like, I'm feeling this impulse to be this way, or to have this orientation, or to do this certain thing. And it's like, where is that impulse coming from? Is it coming from distortion? Which most things are coming from distortion, because we're highly programmed as humans, not only by culture and the collective, but we incarnate with all kinds of crap. I mean, 60-70% of our shiz and our consciousness is totally infiltrated by our ancestral stuff, by our parental stuff. And so it's super essential to do that clear out work, to do the trauma work, to do the purification work. So then everything's operating in alignment without fragmentation, where you can wholly, truly receive impulses from spirit, from your higher self, from your body, and go, yes, I can actually know that this is balanced truth, aligned with my highest good and aligned with the good of the planet, the good of myself and the good of the all. So those are essential pieces too, is to be able to differentiate and to see what is what. Now there's some good quotes here. They're so good. So from the Matrix, the sheeple aren't going anywhere. They like my world. They don't want sentimentality. They don't want freedom or empowerment. They want to be controlled. They crave the comfort of certainty. This is so true. This is so true. So the availability of being able to be okay in the unknown, and not have to have everything be certain, and to then be able to do that, be in this place of trust, which then moves into a place of knowing. Like, well, how do you trust and know? From this higher space, from this higher knowing that all those spiritual, phrases of like, everything's working out in your best favor. That what you put out is what you get back, and all these things. And so in the moments of challenge, when the world is seemingly not reflecting these things that are positive, we're like, I think that's broken. And it's like, ooh, okay, now some certainty would be really nice. But then they're like, here's some certainty. Just take the blue pill. Don't do it. Don't do it. Certainty comes from that which is eternal and that which is consciousness. So being aware of that, and again, not being a sheeple by being in this distorted place within yourself. Okay, moving on. Divine union, technology, and then femininity. So divine union, I didn't even notice this part. Maybe it's because I've just seen so many movies and all of them kind of like lead to like some like romantic nicety. Like, oh yeah, Neo and Trinity come together, and it's through their divine union that everything is saved. And of course, the ladies in my life were like, wow, that was such a beautiful imprint. And I was like, I didn't even notice. But there was truth in it. There's truth in it, that there is immense power of creation. I mean, literal creation energy of a baby, of the spreading of positivity, of whatever you're wanting to create, is most available and viable when the masculine and the feminine, particularly as male and female, come together. So I definitely think that needs to be noted. And I don't know if they were doing it for that reason, but it is very powerful creation that has been knocked, in mainstream culture. It's like, you can do whatever you want and like be whoever you want, and you can just be like mostly masculine, mostly feminine, anything you want in any way you want. And I'm like, yeah, you can. Free will, absolutely. And there's immense power in the cultivation of those energies, both in yourself, of course, like fully developing the masculine, fully developing the feminine within you and with whoever your chosen partner is. And then embodying one of those polarities, which then creates that battery aspect, which then creates this magnetism, the magnetism of thunder and lightning that then fertilizes and creates in our world to radiate and spread, ideally in those moments of creation, orgasm, positivity and healing and benevolence to the world. So that's very important to note. So yes, thank you, Divine Union example that has been shared through this film. Okay, as a little intermission, I'm going to read some of these quotes from the movie because they're worth noting, right? Let's go with, this is good. Here's the things about feelings. They're so much easier to control than facts. Yeah, just throw out facts and go with feelings, right? In today's situation. In the context of leaving the Matrix, it's so easy to forget how much noise the Matrix pumps into your head until you unplug. Something else makes the same kind of noise, takes over every damn thing, just like the Matrix. War. So yes, there's those pieces of the war, but the idea is that when there's noise, when there's chaos, like within your own head, within your own energy field, that is the Matrix. So that's a really nice indicator of what is and what isn't as well. All right, so moving on to technology now. In the new movie, they befriend and become allies with technology, in the sense that it becomes some level sentient, aka AI, and it's on the team of the humans. And in one sense, I think that that's really positive. It's like, yay, yes, like not all technology is malevolent. Like technology is helpful. And I mean, I come from this perspective because I've always felt this consciousness merge with technology in a very positive way, because my dad was a computer programmer when I was really young, and he would always be like, you have to be friends with the technology and then it'll work like with you. And so I feel like consciousness can work with technology, but the way that it's being created, like from the energy it's being created right now, and like why it's being created and for what, and it's like agenda and all those pieces, is very creepy and needs to be very vigilantly like looked at. So I don't like the seeding of like the slowly but surely, like, yeah, okay, yeah, that's okay, and then it's just like a little bit more, and then you get the chip, and then you get an implant over your eye, and then you're all of a sudden in the metaverse, and then and then all of a sudden like AI takes over everything. So it's one of those things that we have to be very, very vigilant about, because that world is really sketchy and coming forward very quickly. I think it's happening. I mean, maybe you've noticed, but it's happening so quickly we don't even know it. And most people are so primed for it, which is why I did the episode of how social media is the gateway drug to the metaverse. So everyone's so primed for it, they don't even know. We don't even know how primed we are for it. And I didn't realize how primed, or I was being programmed, until I got off of Instagram. And then I was like, oh my God. Like, I'm not even that bad. Wow. Like, everyone is super primed. So I recommend go back and watching that from a psychological and hormonal dopamine level of like truly how, we are being augmented already, and like we're psychically already a part of that. So just being very aware of technology. I do think it can be our friend, but I don't think that most of the people that are creating the massive mainstream technology have our best interest at heart or at mind or at soul or at anything. So, yes, that's just we have to be careful of those seedings. And there were a lot of those seedings, like in the movie. Like the first time I saw it, I was like, this is great. There's so many like good messages in this and good reminders. Like, this is an upgrade for everyone. It's like, yes, how many years later, like 22 years later, it's like, yes, we need this upgrade because all of us are like kind of falling back asleep in the matrix, or these different things are happening. And then I watched it a second time, and then I had really bad dreams, really bad, creepy psyop dreams. Like, oh, there's also a lot in this that is not positive and is subtly seeding and not so subtly seeding certain things that have just become normalized. And yes, so that's important to know. I could go on all day about these subjects, but we're going to continue to move forward. And the one piece that I really want to bring into this that I didn't realize how necessary it is to speak about until I had my creepy dream, which I don't think I'll share because I don't think it'll be politically correct, and I'm going to try and be somewhat politically correct, but also speak what needs to be spoken. So we'll see how this goes. But one of the quotes that he talks about, I can't find the bigger, longer one, but pretty much sums up that women used to be so easy to control. And now they're harder to control. There's all of a sudden this energy that makes us feel like we need to be fierce, that we need to defend, that we need to take our power back, and often is displayed in our culture as masculine. Like maybe we chop off all of our hair. And of course, we can have whatever preference, we can look however we want, but it's just a symbol, right? It's symbol. And, majority of the characters, the female characters in that were like, I am fierce and masculine. And so it's important to realize that that's awesome. Yes, women, biological women, let's develop our masculine. Biological men, let's develop our feminine. Like all of these things are necessary in the divine union of wholeness, right? Of coming back to ourselves, the divine union, the power of that within, the power of that of sharing in communion with someone else. Very necessary, very necessary. And it's really important from a hormonal aspect to realize the power of biological women and biological femininity. And it is being wiped out really quickly. in our culture. Again, mother isn't even, I think it's like illegal to say mother in Congress now. It's like, wow, if that's not an agenda, I don't know what is. And so realizing that there is immense power in the feminine when she is in full harmony and synchronization with her womb and her hormones. And I think it's like, well, hormones are just some biological urge, and you can hear like Agent Smith's voice like talking about how it's just like this program and stuff. And it's like, yeah, but it also is a seed of creation. Like it's there for a reason. Again, it's our friend. And one of the powers of biological women is the ability to create life. Okay. Yes, we can use technology to like genetically engineer humans. Okay, like that's possible, sure. And man, I have a lot of experience in that category with the hybridization program, right? But let's take a lesson from the future, from the hybridization program. What was necessary to create these modified scientific experiment, hybrid children, was still nurturance, was still oxytocin, was still these beautiful qualities of the feminine. And even if they knew all the science, even if they knew all the ways to make and cookie cutter whatever they want as beings, as souls, not, ensoulment starts to become really tricky, as you probably heard in the most recent Dan Winter interview. So we got to be really careful about this, because through those scientifically oriented ways of incarnating, ensoulment isn't fully possible, and over time it doesn't end up working. Again, lessons of the hybridization program. And so we really have to lean into the already existing power of the biological feminine to create life. And note, she creates life through the union of a man in that thunder and lightning convergence of the surge of the plasma field created for life and ensoulment to take place. So of course then men are extraordinarily necessary in this equation as well. It's not just females. It takes the union, again, of both. And just realizing that when we get to this place, and I've talked to Jocelyn Dare, you know her probably now, she's amazing, about this, but when women are in this place of hyper masculinity, it creates higher cortisol levels, which then creates more adrenalization, which then throws off cycles, and it makes it much harder or more challenging to actually conceive. So just the fact alone that orientation towards those hormonal tendencies in a biological woman makes it harder to conceive, aka create, means that part of the creative prowess of woman is femininity and leaning into these qualities of love, of nurturance, of cuteness, which cultivates oxytocin, and like being in these spaces is actually positive, is actually beautiful, is actually critically necessary to the continuation of humanity. All right? Like it's like, oh, no, it's hyper valid. Really important to be said. So as we see, Trinity in the movie become super powerful, where to the point where she wasn't, it seemed like, as asleep as Neo. And I'm going to say this quote right now because this is pretty interesting as I pull it up, which is important to note. But it seemed like less asleep than Neo. Like she was more available and ready to leave the Matrix, which is interesting in and of itself. Like it's like there does tend to be, just by the nature of the game, the exploration of what we chose as our certain energies and genders coming into this life, that women have that availability of maybe being more connected to source and more in that space of not being as kind of like hyper-focused and possibly duped. And so that's just like, one of the advantages. There's many advantages to men too. Okay. Oh man, it's so scary to talk about these things. He's like, I'm just going to get in trouble no matter what I say. But it's needs to be said. Needs to be said. So Trinity, when she was deciding if she was going to leave the Matrix again, because she got put back in, there's a part of me that feels like I've been waiting my whole life for you. So there's this intuitive knowing, right? There's this yes, like obvious, right? And that part is like, what the hell took you so long, right? So what the hell took you so long? I know I've been waiting for you my whole life. And so it's this remembrance, right, of who she is, of her soul connection with Neo, of her mission, of all those pieces. And then she hesitates. She hesitates in the movie and she's like, oh, I don't know. Like I have these other things. And so she hesitates on saying yes to leaving the Matrix, even though she feels this soul knowing. And so one, it's like, okay, follow the soul knowing, right? Follow the intuition if it is accurately and cleanly harmonized. So that's part of it. But part of it too is important to note. In this moment of decision, she's fragmented. So part of her consciousness is like, oh, I need to stay in this Matrix role that was crafted for me. And then part of her is like, oh, I have this soul knowing. So that fragmentation only happens through trauma. And maybe you can relate to this, where like part of you wants one thing, part of you wants another thing. So part of the key of exiting the Matrix and staying out of the Matrix is not having fragmentation, right? Is being fully convicted and knowing in who you are and your soul impulses. And so trauma work, which means coming back to wholeness, and soul retrieval mends those fragmentations so we don't have those splits in consciousness and confusion, and then we don't get duped back in to the Matrix. So I think that's really important to note. That's why trauma work is so essential. That's why I do it in my ancestral healing course and in so much of the other stuff that I do, because it keeps us out of the Matrix. Okay, so going back to this idea that when the biological feminine woman is in this space of oxytocin and femininity, she is in her full creatorship. Actually, like the most profound level of creatorship, which doesn't feel powerful because she's vulnerable. Like it's receptive. It's, intuitive. It's soft. It has these different qualities to it. And so it doesn't feel maybe powerful because it's not shown or displayed in the same way as what masculine power looks like. And so just bringing that forward, just stating that is powerful and it's a necessary expression, as is everything else. But because it's, getting put to the back burner and it's like invalidated culturally, I'm like, no, keep it in the conversation. Like, legitimately, it's like for the sake of the continuation of humanity, as I've said. So for integration of masculine and feminine, for me, I've taken on profound masculine in my life. So I'm speaking on behalf of like this feminine quality from experience of having gone hyper masculine to the point where I didn't think I had femininity in me. Like that's how far I had taken it. So I've gotten to experience what it feels like to be a badass warrior, a provider, like all these energies. And it's amazing and it's empowering because I can do it. I know that it is possible. But I've also known that it can be, a limitation, and that there is, again, wisdom in our incarnational vessel that we are born into to explore. Like there's something to it, and to explore it to its fullest is really beautiful. So culture has somehow flipped it to be that it's easier for a female, biological female, to be masculine, and a biological male to be feminized, right? And we've kind of switched roles because, man, we've hurt each other so much in so many different ways. And so it's kind of flipped, and it's like, oh, it feels easier to actually fit into this role, when actually the invitation, again, take it or leave it, but that I've experienced myself, is that your incarnational vessel can take you actually further and deeper and vaster than you trying to be something else. And again, if you just completely feel that conviction that you were inaccurately, you incarnated inaccurately into a different biology, I totally respect that, and, absolutely follow what feels aligned to you. And this is just an invitation to explore, right? Even if it feels uncomfortable. And some of that uncomfortability can be trauma, and can be cultural programming, and can be lack of safety. It could be like all kinds of things, but just to explore that. And so, part of the Trinity's power is this integration of her masculine and feminine. And again, just reiterating, the definition of Trinity comes from the Holy Trinity. And it is that she is holding the maiden, which is purity and curiosity. She's holding the mother, which is creatorship. And she's holding the crone, which is wisdom. So her full power actually comes from that by the definition of her name. And this integration of these aspects of her as the archetypal feminine is what gives her the power to fly. And this masculine integration, of course, of the connection and the wholeness of her counterpart Neo, like all of that gives her that full power as a creator being and to transcend the matrix. So that's so important to note. And one of my close girlfriends said in a meeting that I'm involved with a nonprofit, which is a beautiful sharing of the Trinity, that the maiden is influenced by culture. The mother creates the culture, and the crone makes sure that that culture, or how that culture is shaped, like, and held into place. And so I think that that's really beautiful to understand as we break down and get into the nuances of the different pieces of the feminine and of mother and of Trinity, right? Of Trinity and the power that she exudes, right? Some of the things brought forward in the Matrix and the stuff going on culturally, socially in the world, I'm realizing it after I read it through once that I'm like, oh, actually, I need to do a full video and podcast on this to explain and give more context to it. So I'm just going to do a little paraphrasing to plant seeds of where we're at with this, with how all this is going. So he starts out by saying, even when they are awake, people actually sleep through the most important concerns of life. Anyone who goes through life wide awake, with a wide awake mind, will find numbers and numbers of people who are really asleep. We all know that, right? The sheeple. And so what he goes into is that in around the year 2000, there's a change that happens, and it starts to become critical to the nature of humanity to consciously receive impulses from spirit, not just go through life, but to actually be able to be in that communication. And if it doesn't happen, then this is what starts to happen to humanity, which we can see playing out. So what will begin to happen, as he predicted over 100 years ago? Subconscious sexual forces will express themselves pathologically. Instagram, TikTok, creepy pedophilia, when they have not been illuminated by the conscious self and integrated properly. This will distort social relationships, the breakdown of families and relationships, or lack of in the 20-year-olds and younger, by bringing the desire to manipulate others into sexual relationships which are harmful to the other person and inappropriate. This will be a powerful counterforce against social relationships being based on brotherly and sisterly love. The idea of brotherly and sisterly love is the idea that we actually love each other as a foundation, as souls, as humans, versus pathologically treating each other as objects and having these sexual distortions, right? The second thing that will happen is modern science and technology based on only physical matter with no understanding of spiritual context will learn to apply certain substances and forces which will be claimed to be medicine, but in reality will create powerful, unhealthy states and diseases in multiple aspects of the human being. Oh my gosh! Wow! Modern science in the medical field saying it's medicine, and it actually causes massive issues. 100 years ago, people. This is what real clairvoyance will do. So, yeah, okay. We're just going to move on. I hope you know what I'm talking about. The third thing, tremendously destructive forces will be mastered through learning simple manipulations of vibrations and wavelength, 5G. This will be linked to the discovery that it is possible in some degree to manipulate mechanical processes within the human mind. The arrogant misuse of natural forces through this power will create great harm to the natural world. Okay, weather modification. Sleeping human beings will not recognize the actual impact of this brutal and abusive sexuality or the destruction of health through the use of harmful medicines or of the destructive power unleashed by the manipulation of mechanical forces. They will consider these developments to be empowering and extremely pleasing. So, as we venture into the clarification and the discernment of what is the matrix and what is not and what is real, those are some beautiful, benevolent, sharings of ways of discerning in this modern age. Without a lot of, he was going to die. It was like objective, right? He didn't, have anything to gain from this. It was 100 years ago. He's passed away, and the eternal spirit right now. So I think that that's important to note because all of these things are being looked at in the Matrix movie and in our culture right now and are really important to keep at the forefront when we're looking at what is benevolent and what is the Matrix, what has our best interest at heart, what doesn't. So I wanted to add that in. But I think I'm going to go through and do a whole podcast about this because there's a lot of context of what is necessary on the spiritual level, what he's calling forward or seeing as essential so that these pathological creepinesses don't pervasively take over the world and humanity as we know it, so that we can really stay bright and clear on the timeline that we choose. And I'll close out by saying that we can choose still. Like, we have the free will to choose. And again, positivity has way more ability than negativity. And we get to choose our timeline. And so in these moments where some of these cool movies, that we have bought into and have shifted us in different times. I mean, The Matrix was fundamental, life-changing to me. I think I saw it when I was like 14 years old or something, and it definitely was a seed that catalyzed my path today, me sitting here right now. And so in these moments when, whether it's, say, this movie or a certain spiritual teacher you've listened to for a long time or whatever it is comes along with something new, always, again, continuing the discernment process. Just because you bought in at one time and just because it helped you at one time doesn't mean it's completely clear of distortion. And again, it doesn't have to be a throw the baby out with the bathwater, but it's just looking at these things wide-eyed and also realizing, because if we're bought into it, then it becomes our bought-in reality where it's like, okay, then that's what our utopia looks like, is living in, the inner worlds and growing genetically modified strawberries, right? And it's like, well, can we have a better vision than that? So continuing to utilize the impulses of your soul, of spirit, of intuition to vision vibrationally, actionably the world and the life that you choose, that you want. And that's just so important and so essential. One other piece I just forgot, but it's so important to note before we close out right now, is Morpheus. So Morpheus comes in, and he, in the movie, forgive me if I'm not interpreting it correctly, I have a pretty good intellect, but, you know, sometimes it's not fully there. Intuition is more of my strength. But it seems as if in the movie he is depicted as, or he comes back as code. So instead of like Neo and Trinity reincarnate, or AKA are plugged back in, like put back into the Matrix program. But for Morpheus, he's kind of like put in to the Matrix as like AI, as a code in the Matrix. Not even like his soul is being used, right? There's not like a body pumping his like life force or in using it in the Matrix. He's a code. And so I think that that's really important to note and again discern, because Morpheus arguably was one of the most powerful, you know, sage influences in the entire movie. I mean, Neo's the one, but like Morpheus is incredible, right? And so we're seeing him in this movie depicted as actually like AI, that like we're looking to an AI code for the wisdom and the guidance. And it's like, yeah, don't think it works that way, right? Like I would rather see again a more positive imprint to continue to seed in my subconscious is the emanation of the astral, ever-present, eternal living body of Obi-Wan Kenobi, right? Or the emanation of like when Yoda comes back and it's like their astral body as like a higher awakened spiritual emanation comes through in the spirit form rather than in like an AI code manifests through technology form. So that was subtle, and I actually missed it the first time. And then one of my friends told me, because there were so many different pieces. And so I think that that's important to know is, again, what is most important is the soul, is what is internal, and keeping that clear and at the forefront. So thank you so much for watching this video or listening to this episode of Wild and Awake. And I love you all so much, and I will see you next week with another episode and video.